I just spent a week at the 2022 World Candle Congress with some of the greatest candle making and business experts in the world, and I want to share a little bit about my experience with you. Hi everyone, my name is Wade. If you are new to this channel, I'm the owner of Black Tie Barn, and all my videos are about candle making and running a small business for the most part. And the first thing I want to say before we go any further is, after getting back in town, the change in the seasons and the allergens, my allergies have been kicking my butt ever since I got back. So my voice is a little bit off, things feel and look a little bit weird, but I just wanted to get this video out for you and just to let you know about my experience at this Candle Congress. So once again, I mentioned that I went to the 2022 World Candle Congress in New Orleans, which is the National Candle Association here in the United States. You've got Alafave, and then the ECMA, which is the European Candle Manufacturers Association, I believe. Anyways, there are other candle conferences throughout the year. But this is the only world one, and it's every 3 years in a different country. So I was able to make it, and I wanted to share with you some of the insight and some of the takeaways from spending a week with these great minds and these great businesses. And these businesses range from some of the $1 million and $1 billion actual candle businesses, as well as the manufacturers and the distributors, and really just all of the big players in the candle industry. Now, I was actually gone for about 10 or 12 days, but the conference was about a week long, and it involved conferences and seminars and work groups, networking, as well as an expo with all these great manufacturers, suppliers, distributors. So it was a really, really great experience. Now, I was sharing some small updates while I was there on my Instagram, here on the channel, Facebook, and but a lot of you, a ton of you, had reached out asking if I would do a follow-up video talking about the experience and things that I could share. So that is the purpose of today's video. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details about every little single topic because, again, this was a week long. In some of these seminars, I was sat there recording and listening and taking notes for hours at a time. So there's only so much I can share in a video, and I'm going to try to keep this as concise as possible and give you some of the main takeaways. But I do plan on additional, more focused videos on some of these topics in the future. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, hit subscribe below. It's completely free, and hit that little bell icon next to it. That turns on notifications. So when I post new videos in the future, you are alerted and notified so you don't miss them. And of course, after you subscribe, go ahead and check out all the videos I have already here on the channel, which there's a lot, covering a lot of different topics. So thanks again for being here. Let's go ahead and get to it. Now, to start with, I'm just going to talk about some general information, main takeaways, summarize some really key points, and just tell you about the experience in general. And you'll have to forgive me in advance. I apologize. This is not going to be a very systematic outline. I'm going to follow these little things. This might be a little all over the place because I'm just going to be talking about things as they come to mind. Now, I have a little bit of a roadmap in front of me to make sure I don't miss a few things, but for the most part, this is going to be pretty casual conversation. So as I mentioned, this is called the World Candle Congress, and it's basically a conference, but it involves a lot more than just a conference. And if any of you have been to any other conferences in any other industry in the world, so maybe you work in a technology industry, you're working in a food industry, or really every industry almost has different conferences around the country, around the world. And if you've ever been to one of those, you know how big they are. You realize there's a whole side of the industry you didn't even know existed. Well, the same thing is very, very true with the candle industry. For those of you that are brand new to the candle making, you're just getting started, you're just getting your feet wet, it already seems like a lot of information, right? And a lot going on. But let me tell you, it's a whole different world out there. We're here as the small and medium-sized businesses, and then there's this whole new level. At this Congress, or at this conference, it is the $1 million, multi-million dollar, billion-dollar companies that are at this Congress, not just candle manufacturers and retailers. Now, I'm not going to name any specific ones, but I'm sure you can use your imagination to think of a few that were probably there, or at least had reps there. But really, this conference is about some of the biggest key players in the industry. We're talking about the wax manufacturers, the wick manufacturers and main distributors, equipment manufacturers, suppliers of integral parts of candle making, packaging, things like that. There's really just so much going on at a conference like this. So many great opportunities at one of these events. Not just to get your hands on other resources, but networking in general. Like I said, it's a very different world. I myself have been to other conferences in the past, and in fact, the NCA, National Candle Association, has annual ones. But I'd never been to a World Candle Congress. This was my first one ever, and it was amazing. It was a great, great experience. I'm so glad I went. In fact, one of my favorite parts about this entire experience was meeting people that I work with all the time, but I had never actually physically met before. It was really, really cool putting names to faces and actually having real conversations. One of the first persons I ever met when I entered the candle industry, especially as I started to scale, I got to meet her not only at the expo, but then spent an hour, 2, 3 hours maybe on one of the networking dinner nights, meeting with two of the main companies that actually wax the wicks and pre-wick assembly and then distribute to other companies. I got to meet both of them. Actually, we had conversations at one table together, which was really, really cool. I actually have a picture of that I'm waiting to be sent to me. Otherwise, I would share that here. But that was a great experience. I got to meet in person the people behind AAK or Golden Wax, as many of you use a lot of their products. Other wax companies like Claris and CJ Robinson, and even Curax was there from Europe. And so there was and of course, Wooden Wick was there with wicks and jars and waxes as well. Just a lot of great industry leaders when it comes to candle making. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about these in detail as I kind of move through a few of these bullet points that I have here. Just kind of the general takeaway here is that it was a great event where I got to meet a lot of great people, do a lot of great networking, create some new relationships and build on some ones that already had a bit of a foundation. So as I mentioned, there were seminars and workshops, that kind of thing, as well as an actual expo, which was fantastic. That was a whole day long, and it was incredible. There was a couple companies there that do the large equipment manufacturing. So Hairhammer from Germany, for example, is the company that builds all these wick assembly machines. Now, there are other ones as well, but that was one that, as an example, was there. And these automatic filling stations like the large million-dollar and multi-million-dollar companies use. So every major key player in the industry is at this event, which is really, really cool. And like I said, it moves around every 3 years to a different area of the world. So the previous one was in Barcelona, this one's New Orleans, and I believe the next one is in Mexico, if I remember right, but I don't think anything is actually specified yet, but I think that's true. So one of the key things that I wanted to talk about in this video to kind of pass along some insight that was really heavily discussed at the conference was about supply chain, production, and pricing. That whole thing, right, that all industries are dealing with right now. That is a concern. And so I spent a couple hours just in a single workshop or seminar just on that with a lot of great information. And so let's start with pricing, because that's the easiest one to address. And a lot of you are probably wondering, where is pricing going? Because right now prices are high. A lot of prices on materials are high and finished products are high. You might have to be charging a higher price to your customers because of that. What's the outlook for pricing? Well, it seems like that pricing has continued to be high for a period of time because it's not just candle making industry, right? This is affecting the entire world and all industries. And there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of it is due to supply chain, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. Some of it's due to production, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. A lot of it's due to inflation that's going on, especially in the United States, but globally as well. Partially because of the impact of the pandemic, partially because of political reasons or economic reasons, and again, partially because of the invasion in Ukraine. There's a lot of reasons and factors that have led to price increases on supplies and raw materials. So is that going to improve in the near future? It doesn't sound like it, unfortunately. However, that's just the nature of business in general. Prices go up and down. You've got to deal with these things as a business. That shouldn't stop you from getting into the business now. Just something to know so you know how to deal with it right when it happens. If you need to increase your prices a little bit to deal with it, then that's completely fine. A lot of people are worried about starting a business in an environment like this, but think of it this way. If you can start a business now and make it work with current prices and current economic issues, it only gets easier, right? So that's kind of one way to think about it. And so I just wanted to, I guess, address that first. A year, 2 years ago, a wax that I was using was around $1.19 a pound. Now it's $1.85 a pound, right? So things are increased significantly. And many of you are using waxes that are $2 to $3 or $4 a pound. Same with fragrance oils, per ounce, actually, in that case. And yes, prices are high. We all know that. And it is just kind of par for the course, to use a golfing analogy. And it's just something we have to deal with right now. Some speculation that this will start improving over 2023 and hopefully start rebounding and showing some normalcy around 2024. But that's all speculation. We just don't know. Now, supply chain and production is something that we might see some change to a little bit sooner than pricing. And honestly, they all kind of affect each other. Let's talk about production first. It's due to the pandemic and other issues over the last couple of years. A lot of production facilities for wax specifically, I'm talking about wax, have shut down entirely. So some countries have lost 60% of their production when it comes to wax. Now, the United States, which is most of the viewers and subscribers here to this channel, I'm based in the United States, we're actually doing pretty well. Like, we're doing okay. We still have most of our production in place. Obviously, we don't have to deal with supply chain issues if we're producing here and you're getting your wax here. But other countries like Europe are having issues with production. They've lost a lot of their production capabilities, and worse so, a lot of them can produce, but they're landlocked, and with what's going on with Ukraine, they can't get the wax out. So even if they could produce more, they can't get it out to where it needs to go. And so that has created a whole other issue, especially for anyone using European waxes and just for the European market in general. It's a lot tougher for them right now than it is for the United States, which is, I guess, good if you're in the United States, but very unfortunate if you're outside of the United States. And then we talk about China. Now, a lot of the raw materials, and the reason I'm mentioning all this is regardless of where you're at, we all use raw materials that come from all over the place. So your production might be in one country, but raw materials might be coming from another. And that's why it's important to know what's going on with the industry and around the world. China, a lot of production happens in China. Waxes, as well as a lot of raw materials, come from there as well. And China's actually committed and doing a pretty good job with production. Now, we had a lot of supply chain issues, which is where I'm kind of transitioning into now, with exporting and importing goods. You were getting ships that were just stuck at bays and couldn't, like, you could see your materials, you could see the ships, the cargo ships, but you just couldn't get access to the product. They were all backed up, right? Now, that was mostly an impact from the pandemic. Well, that's starting to relax a little bit. We're starting to see some better flow and some better moving and some catching up when it comes to exports and imports. So long story short, to try to wrap this up in terms of supply chain and production, there are still some production challenges, particularly with waxes, again, is what we're talking about here, and even more particularly with soy waxes. However, both paraffin and soy and other materials all of them are seeing inflation and price hikes. However, production and exporting and importing of certain waxes is a little bit more difficult than others. So while some areas are doing okay, others are not. But supply chain and exporting, importing, everything is pointing to that should slowly start to improve as time goes on. It's already improving a little bit, and the hope and the trajectory looks like it's going to improve throughout the rest of this year, 2023, 2024, and hopefully, knock on fake wood, is that that's going to continue. So while there's still challenges, absolutely, hopefully there is some hope on the horizon. It appears a lot of the experts are speculating that we should see some improvement when it comes to supply chain. Maybe not immediately, but as time goes on. The next thing I was going to talk about really was about wax and what's going on with wax in the industry right now, but I just spent most of the time talking about wax. So again, at this conference, we had reps from Kirax, which is overseas in Europe. There was other, AAK and CJ Robinson and Claris and Wood & Wick and some other wax manufacturers and distributors there as well. And they were all pretty much sharing the same sentiments. I did get samples of a few waxes that I haven't used before. Talked with a lot of suppliers that I currently already use. I had a long conversations with CJ Robinson, Claris, and AAK, which is really, really neat. And hopefully throughout this video, I've been showing some footage and some pictures of some of these interactions, which more than anything, just to keep you interested into the video, because it was really cool experience. And I just want to share some of that while I'm talking. In case some of you are wondering, can you buy directly from the manufacturers? And yes, you can. The problem is that most require a minimum of a pallet. Some of them require full truckloads, like monthly. So that is why most people, especially small businesses, especially those starting out, go through suppliers, right? And to get their wax, because they're the middleman for you. Now, one thing I want to touch on briefly, and it was probably the biggest disappointment of the conference itself, was about vessels and jars. There was a significant lack of suppliers and distributors for vessels and candle jars and other packaging type materials. One of the reasons for that is it's a market that is struggling right now because of the export-imports problems that we had for a while. And the delays in getting products, there just wasn't a lot of distributors there in terms of jars and vessels. Now, there were a couple, ARC, for example, and then EOTW. But however, outside of those two, there really wasn't a lot of major glass manufacturers there. For example, I expected to see Libby there. There was no Libby. Maybe Anchor Hawking, no Anchor Hawking. While the turnout was great across the board, the one that was definitely lacking was vessels. Now, as I just talked about, there has been price increases on vessels, and there's been difficulty getting vessels reliably. And so picking the right vessel and something you can source consistently has been very important over the past year or two, and it still will remain important. But it does sound like that because of supply chain issues, hopefully relaxing, starting now going forward, even just a little bit should significantly improve vessel supply over time. Now, Wicks, I can't really get into Wicks in detail in this because it just so much depends on what wax you're using and what jars you're using. And I've got lots of videos here on the channel talking about Wicks and talking about testing and making candles and all of that. But just to share with you a little bit more, to kind of back up a second, as I mentioned before, this conference is really a collection of the leaders in the industry, and that includes Wicks as well, right? So Atkins and Pierce, many of you have probably heard of. Wicks, they were there. So a couple of the largest wick manufacturers in the world, and there were a few others as well. Filtech was there, Wicket was there, and they provide other things other than Wicks as well. But the point is the few major companies responsible for creating all the wicks that all of you are accustomed to using were there. And then they will supply other distributors who then create wick assemblies or wax those wicks or become sort of a distributor to the other suppliers. Wicks Unlimited, Wicket, those are the two largest examples. And so I had a great time having lengthy conversations. And in fact, one evening I spent pretty much the entire evening with both of them at one table, just having great conversation. And I want to mention too that I do have plans here on the channel to have some actual interviews or collaborations with some of these people and some of these other companies that I met at the expo and at the conference here on the channel, which would be really, really great. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. I think you guys hopefully would enjoy that as much as I do. Now, we did do a couple great seminars on wicks and how to, what you're looking for with wicking and how to test properly and when you should change wicks and what different wick characteristics mean. We saw a great demonstration that was funny and entertaining, but also very informative. We got to see the science side of it while also the practical side of it as well. Again, that's a whole separate video, but I do plan on sharing some of the specific notes I took and creating updated videos on some of these topics here in the near future. And I briefly mentioned this before, but one of the cooler things about this conference as well was everything that you need to scale a business. This is the place to go to learn from the industry leaders. What equipment they use to scale their entire businesses from, a handful of candles to hundreds of candles to thousands of candles to tens of thousands of candles a day and hundreds of thousands of candles a month. All of them are here, and that is where you learn all this information. Again, some of the equipment I talked about from Hair Hammer, for example, and there are others as well. And so just learning about how these businesses scale and the type of production they do and everything they have in place, all the processes they have in place was just a really, really great experience. And I'm looking forward to continuing to pass along that information and kind of serving as like an intermediary between them and all of you as much as I can as time goes on. I spent 2 to 3 hours one night at a table talking with several representatives from ASTM, which is the standard, the safety and testing standard for a lot of industries, but of course we're focused on candle making. They talk about labeling, they talk about safety standards and fire prevention and all of that. And so if you've never heard of ASTM when it comes to candle making, look it up. I'll try to share some resources as well. But that is something that everyone should be aiming for. You want to use that as your guideline for testing. It not only will help you create better products, but also helps protect you if you were to ever get into an issue with one of your products down the road. And so I spent a couple hours at a table with 4 or 5 of the representatives from those committees. One of them had asked me to consider joining that committee. And so that is something I'm considering doing in the future. But like I said, I had hours of conversation with them, past NCAA presidents. It was just a great all-around experience. The wealth of knowledge and information that these folks have is incredible. We're talking about people that have worked their entire life in the industry, but not just that, generations of involvement in the industry. I met one gentleman who had been in the industry for 5 generations. Meeting all of these people and just getting to listen to everything they had to say. Now, sort of a twist here was I was going to kind of soak up as much information as possible, right? But a lot of them had recognized me from this channel and just working with them in the industry in other ways and production and, just being involved in the industry. And so I got to meet a lot of people that knew who I was. And so I got to have some great conversation and share what I knew there and share some of my experience. But for the most part, I spent 95% of my time there listening. And that was awesome because the information in this industry known by all of these people is absolutely incredible. It was a great experience, and I'm glad that you all kind of followed along with me, and I hope you guys enjoyed what I was sharing as I went. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Even though it was sort of a roundabout, casual, all over the place conversation, I just wanted to just give you a little bit of an insight into my experience there. And like I said, I will be doing other focused videos on some of these here in the future to kind of break down and dive deeper into some of these, as you know we like to do here on this channel. So if you don't want to miss out on those, again, don't forget to subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. And definitely take a look, because sometimes you will get unsubscribed just if you go dormant for a while. So be sure to check if you are subscribed. I really would appreciate if you guys give this video a thumbs up by hitting the like button below. Again, I'm so glad you guys are all here. I'm so glad I got to experience this, and even more happy that I get to share it all with you as well, at least as much as I can. So thanks for being here, and I will see you all next time.